Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns. I really hope you're having a great day today. I wish you well, and I hope that you're managing to maintain your level of presence. You're able to accept the things that are arising for you today, not in a way that you can't change them, but accepting them so that you can change them. And I hope that you're allowing compassion to lead you, and I hope that curiosity is also something you're holding. You're nestling inside of curiosity so that you can have this sort of natural wonder about what is arising for you, because that is sometimes the best way to to experience what we're experiencing, accept what it is that we're experiencing, without this sort of like, oh no, things should be this way, or I wish things were this way. Oftentimes it is just a very simple concept of just being curious about what is happening to you that can make all the difference with that. And it can also make a huge difference with children, right? When we can, encourage children who are curious by nature, right? When we can encourage them to be curious about what's going on with their emotions, and curious about what's going on with their their physical sensations and their thoughts. When we can encourage a curiosity in children, this is going to lead to a more basically more awareness, and that ultimately that becomes more regulation. And I'm going to talk now about how important that is, right? And so the title of this video today, or this podcast today, will be why it's important to teach children mindfulness practices. The other day I was on the phone with or on a video conference call with one of my clients, and it kind of occurred to us both almost at the same time that that this is a person who's in his mid-30s. He actually doesn't happen to have children at this point in his life, but we discussed we were discussing during the call, the importance of the ability to see our emotions and to not react to the emotions that we're feeling and seeing. And in that non-reaction, that first step of just being able to just not react suddenly and spontaneously to what's going on with us, that's the first step to healthy regulation. And almost at the same time, we both said, could you imagine if every child growing up had these tools? Could you imagine if we taught this like we teach math and English and social studies to children as they grow up? I mean, could you imagine the years of suffering and pain and confusion that could be avoided? Because right now, what I do is I spend my days working with people who are adults, right? Who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even I don't have anybody older than 50, but or outside of their 50s. But I spend time with all these adults trying to unpack, all of these years of the choices and the habits and the tendencies and the resentments and the confusion and the overwhelm that has been, that's been a result of the experience that they've had since they were little children, right? Because the fact of the matter is, right, if you're a 35-year-old person, right, then your life has been comprised of roughly 1 billion seconds, right? Like if you're 35 years old, you have lived 1 billion seconds of time, right? And what happens is in each one of those seconds, right, we can call the clock second as a moment, right? Like that is the present moment. Like that's just as tiny as we can get it, right? And also as big as we can get it, but that's a different conversation. But basically what's happening is that who we are now, right? Like the flavors of ice cream that I like, and the music that I like to listen to, the things that bother me, the things that make me happy, the things that turn me on, the things that gross me out. All of this stuff is a culmination, a sum total of each experience that I've had during those billion seconds that I've been alive. Now for me, I'm almost 52 years old, so I've been more like 1.5 billion almost, but the point is though that's what we are, right? Our sense of self, and again, all of our desires, all of our tendencies, all of our habits, all of our personality traits, right? They are all a culmination of every single experience that we've had, and specifically to our emotional reactions to them. Okay, our minds themselves, right? Like the thing that we call the mind, right, is not something that is just grown on its own in a vacuum, right? It is very much created by the environment in which we live and in which we grow up, right? And so the thing is that all of these different moments and tendencies and preferences and disgust and love and all of this stuff that makes us who we are, right? Like the fact that I love certain foods and I detest other foods, right? Like that thing that I am, right, is a product of not just every single thing that I've experienced, right? Because maybe maybe I ate black olives when I was a kid, and I happen to love black olives now, but I didn't love black olives all the time, right? Why didn't I love black olives all the time, right? It's not because of the olive, right? It's because of the emotional reaction that I had to that first experience of black olives. And black olives specifically is a thing for me because when I was little, I was maybe about 10 years old, and one of my friends was eating these black olives and he made it look so delicious. Like I was like, oh my gosh, this thing I gotta have one of these things. It looks so good. It looked almost like it was pieces of chocolate, and the way that he was eating them was like you're like downing all the chocolates. Like, give me one before they're gone. And I put that thing in my mouth, and it was so not what I expected it to be. It was literally a traumatic experience for me. Like I was spitting for an hour trying to get that taste out of my mouth. I couldn't stand it, right? And so I grew up as a person who, no, I don't like black olives, right? Until, lo and behold, another emotional experience, and this one was of love, right? This was an experience where I was, in a beautiful restaurant on a date with a woman who I really was very, very excited to be with. This woman actually happens to be my wife at this point, and she was like, no, you got to try this olive. This is different. And trying that, I fell in love with it, right? So again, the emotional connection that I had to it was that strong, right? At one point, it completely turned me off of it, and at another point, the emotions completely, brought me back into it, right? And the point that I'm making here, the point that I'm trying to come at when I talk about the emotions, right, is that all of these different things that we do, right, all of these different experiences that we have, and these little things that we've done across these billions of seconds that we've been alive, right, this is what becomes the implicit memories, right? So I had this implicit memory of olives being horrible, and so you couldn't get me to try an olive until there was this woman who was so, it was like I was so, wanted to impress her with my openness that I finally tried an olive again, And so the idea then is that, implicit memory is really, again, implicit memory is something that we all have, the implicit memories is what kind of guides us through our lives, right? Like it's this unconscious set of memories and understandings of the way the world works, right? And this is how we make our decisions. This is how we decide what we're going to, we're going to go left or we're going to go right. It's based on the implicit memories, right, that we have, right? That going left towards this thing, I have this implicit memory of that being a painful experience, and so I go right, right? And of course, that's a simple and silly example. And obviously, if you and I were to talk a little bit about some of your, desires and your loathing and your tendencies, we could start to piece together some of those implicit memories. And the idea, of course, with mindfulness is to bring those implicit memories to the explicit consciousness, right? And when we can do that, now we can understand it. Right? But that's not what this video is about. This video is about the emotions that are involved with this process, right? Because the thing is that when you form a memory, right, and we're forming memories all the time, right? Every second of every day, you are, the way that you pour coffee into a cup, the way that you put, just so much sugar, all that stuff, every single thing that we're doing, every little tiny thing that we're doing, right, is building into a memory. right? And as we do things more and more frequently with repetition, those memories become deeper and deeper and deeper. The other thing that impacts the depth of our memory, and the thing that creates, really what they call long-term memory, right? Like those really strong memories that we have, right? They're about the emotion, right? This is why, you don't remember every single meal that you eat, right? There's no way that you can remember every single meal that you eat. You drive yourself mad if you try to remember every single thing that you ate every single day, right? However, we all can remember that night, on a date, 5 years ago, where I had the most amazing, dish in my entire life, right? Like I can remember like how, and it's amazing how you can remember certain aspects of that, certain details of that experience that are really, really vivid, right? The reason why you can remember that so vividly is because of the emotional, involvement that you had with it, right? And so I would venture to guess, if it's something like a meal, right, that the meals that you remember the most, right, are probably around things like dates, birthdays, parties, a burger before the greatest concert that you ever saw, these kind of things, right? Because your emotional connection to the experience was so strong that your brain, formed a deeper level of memory, right? And so when with kids now, right, as kids are growing up, right, they're going through their schooling, they're going through their peers and their peer pressure, and they're going through the difficulty of navigating this relationship, this daily changing relationship with their parents and with everybody around them. They're dealing with their constant changes of their own bodies, right? Like their brains are under construction for years and years and years, and their bodies also, everything is just bursting with action. And our kids are sort of, at times grappling with all of this. And there's a lot of emotions that are going to be involved with this, right? The emotions for their whole lives are pushing them and pulling them in the different directions, right? Pushing them towards things that they want and pulling them away from things that they don't want, right? And so every time one of these emotional things happens, those memories of whatever they're doing right then and there are, become more strong and stronger implicit memories, right? And so the idea is, right, that when a child is bullied, for instance, right, there's a lot of fear involved with being bullied, right? And that bullying then is going to create whatever happens during that bullying situation, right? If a child is told, "Oh, you're fat," then that memory is, implicitly, it's not going to be something that you necessarily call to mind consciously, but implicitly you're going to remember that you're going to associate the sensation of being told that you're fat with an extreme level of fear and vulnerability and weakness and and that's going to form part of your personality. And then generally speaking, what happens is that person, right, that person who had a very strong emotional experience, right, with having been called fat, then that person is probably going to struggle with their weight for their whole lives. Just so happens that I happen to be one of those people, right? And this was something that wasn't even a bullying situation. I'm going to tell you right now that it was when I was joining the neighborhood soccer team, right? It was like, soccer was a new thing when I was a kid. When I was 8 years old, soccer was not as popular as it is now. And so this one guy was forming this league. They were going to go travel to different neighborhoods, different parts of New York City to play other kids and stuff. And so he was putting together the team, right, for the first time. And of course, everybody's all excited, and I wanted to be in on it. I was like really excited to do it. And one day, and I have to say, he was very kind about it. He was very, he tried to. He tried to be gentle and kind about it, right? But basically what he told me was that I had to be the goalie because I was overweight and I wouldn't be fast enough on the field. And lo and behold, I mean, a few years ago, I had to lose 100 pounds to get to where I am now. And I've already given a few of them back. Like I've already taken a few of them back. And I'm not, the weight that I was when I lost 100 pounds. I'm not 100 pounds back, but certainly like with COVID-19, I put on my COVID-19, and and weight has always been something that's been difficult for me. Right? And so this has a real life, real world application to it, right? It wasn't just about how I felt about my weight. It is actually a very serious problem for me, a very, not serious problem, but a very strong difficulty for me to manage my weight properly, right? And this is, again, goes right back to that one moment that happened, right? But now in that moment, if I had known how to manage my emotions and I had known how to sort of let go of what this person was saying and understand that he's, if I had learned that the emotions that I was feeling, or the body weight itself, the body image, is not me. That's just my body, right? And if I had known that back then when I was 8 years old, I probably would have saved myself a lot of trouble with my weight. And I probably would have saved myself a lot of emotional anguish that came from it, right? And instead, I grew up as a very angry person. I grew up as a very jealous person. I grew up with a very weak sense of self-worth, right? And this is all, not just that one soccer coach, but that was part of it, right? And so what else happened throughout my life, right? What else was there that all those little moments? Now, of course, I can't remember them, right? That's the implicit part of it. Now, as I journal and as I explore myself, I can unpack it now, which is what I'm doing for my clients now, right? We're kind of, I'm not a psychotherapist or anything, so I'm not getting into like the trauma part of it. But what I'm doing is I'm teaching them how to open up their consciousness to those implicit memories that have been impacting them all along, right? But the idea is, like, imagine if we taught our kids how to manage these emotions and how to control the stress levels that come, because that's where it is, right? I felt stress in that moment. I felt fear. I felt I was not accepted for who I am, and so I became afraid, and that fear created the stress response. So whatever else happened during that conversation, maybe my coach said something really beautiful about me, but it didn't register because the fear, the stress that came from the fear had taken over, right? Because when we experience stress, right, we're not in control anymore of our perceptions and our thoughts, right? The stress is an emotional, it's an emotional and automatic action that happens to us, right? And again, it's one thing to try to fix all this when you're 30, 40, 50 years old, but imagine if we could have been moderating it and modulating it throughout our lives, right? As children, we could have avoided all of this, right? And because another thing that happens, and another reason why it's very important or very valuable to teach kids how to, these mindfulness practices, is that it will reduce the stress in the first place, right? Because when we're in the stress response, right, we're not learning, right? We're not remembering things, right? Except like really negative things, right? We're not really, like I say in this podcast, this is the showing up to your life podcast. When we're in the stress response, we cannot show up to our lives, not in the way that we can without the stress response, right? And so teaching kids, mindfulness practices, what it does is gives them the tools to regulate their stress and their emotions, and allows for a conscious and intentional maturation, right? And that's the thing, right? Because it's about maturing, in a healthy way, right? Like our bodies are going to mature, right? Our bodies are going to grow, the hormones are going to do their thing, the brain size is going to get to be what it is, right? But we're talking about emotional maturation too, right? And so a few weeks ago, I did another podcast where I mentioned, like the people that you see, like getting angry at like servers in restaurants or baristas. I mean, every once in a while you'll see a video online of somebody just treating somebody just absolutely awfully, right? Well, that's emotional regulation or lack of emotional regulation on the part of the person doing the abuse in that situation, right? And on the receiving end, if that person doesn't have the kind of tools that we talk about in this podcast, well, then they are going to, experience a very disproportionate and very, very strong aspect of upset from that and damage, right? And so the thing is, though, right, that when our kids grow up to be in their 30s, right, they won't need coaching and therapy, right, to heal the wounds, because they'll have a mastery over the emotions that create the wounds, right? Because the thing is, right, that unresolved stress today in a young child, right, eventually becomes an angry disposition later, or a crippling fear of the world that makes them, hide in a dead-end job, right? Or the inability to be vulnerable with others and inhibiting their romantic relationships, right? Or as Dr. Gabor Mate tells us, right? Children who are unable to manage and express in a healthy way their big emotions, specifically with anger, well, they're going to wind up with very, very scary health risks, right? Like, Dr. Mate said in a video that I referenced the other day in my podcast that I watched, he says, when kids grow up, when kids are not allowed to express themselves, right? And they don't know how to sort of manage that whole process of expressing themselves, well, what Dr. Mate says is, I used to talk to them in the palliative care ward when they have cancer. And that's the thing, right? Stress itself becomes part of the emotional implicit memory that I'm talking about, right? Like, stress itself becomes an automatic thing, right? Because you practice it, right? That's the thing, right? You practice stress just like you practice anything else. You practice being angry just like you practice anything else. Whether you mean to practice it or not is a different question, but you are practicing it by getting angry all the time, by getting stressed all the time. You are practicing it. And therefore, it becomes closer and closer and more automatic. And as it becomes automatic, that's when it has really, really big impacts in our lives, right? Like the ability to hold down a job because you get too angry all the time. The ability, like I said, to have a fruitful and loving relationship with someone because you're not available, right? That's what we're talking about here, right? And ultimately, it results, for our kids, it results in happipiness and fulfillment for them. And isn't that what we want as children? I mean, as parents, right? That's what we want for our children. Is we want them to be happy and more fulfilled in their lives, right? And this work, when we can train children to do this work, that's what the result will be. More happiness, more fulfillment, more regulation, more ability to function in society. And isn't that what we want for them, right? Now, here's the thing, right? Yes, there should be institutional teaching of mindfulness, and I'm working on that, right? I every couple of weeks I send an email out to the director of the public schools here in Denver to try to get in there to start teaching children this work. That's something that is a goal of mine, and I'm trying. It's unfortunately not a big priority for a lot of school administrators right now, right? It's coming along. There are definitely, in the UK, they're doing a lot of great work with mindfulness in schools. And in America, a couple of stories I've heard is where teachers are replacing, pardon me, detention, pardon me, replacing detention with meditation, and it's having enormous benefits. But for now, right, we can't wait for the schools to catch up. We can't wait for the institutions to catch up to all this. So what we can do now is we can model it for our kids, right? We can show our kids how we regulate ourselves, how we work on ourselves with these practices, so that we can so that when we become more balanced and they see that we're more balanced, they see how good it feels, and they see the benefits. They see that we're not yelling as much. They see that we're not reactive to things, right? And that becomes attractive to them. that becomes that positive emotion for them when they see it and they remember it, right? And so you don't necessarily have to teach a child how to do the meditation. You have to model it for them. And tomorrow I'm going to get into the importance of compassion in this same regard, and how important it is, how really vitally valuable it is to model compassion and self-compassion for our children. So I hope you're able to watch that video tomorrow. As always, if you would like to get some information about how to do these practices so that you yourself can start to regulate, and so that you can model that for the people around you, whether it's the children or the adults around you, right? It's a beneficial thing. And I would love to explain more of these benefits and talk to you about how to do some of these practices. You'll be amazed at how easy it can be. All you got to do is hit me up, okay? Go to my website, artburnscoaching.com. You can book a free coaching call there, or you can email me or comment on this post wherever you're seeing it, and let's just get into a conversation together. All right? Let's do it. It can't hurt just to have a conversation, so let me know, okay? I would love to meet you, and I'd love to talk to you about this, and I would love to help you to these really, so there's 3 practices. That's it. There's 3 practices. It's not going to take more than 10 minutes out of your day, I promise you. And it's amazing the benefit that you're going to get from this. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I wish you well, and I'll be back again tomorrow to talk about my favorite subject, which is compassion, and most importantly, self-compassion. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.